Hello, everybody. This is Mickey Moore, your host for Run Life Today. Thanks for joining us in another episode. I'm super excited to have my friend and my primary physician, Dr. Matt Standridge, with us. Doctor, how are you?
I'm excellent. You can just call me Matt, Mickey. That's great.
Okay, okay, thanks, Matt. So again, our episodes are here to hear some authentic, inspiring stories and to share some advice on how we can best integrate work and life to whatever degree of success we can reach. You know, at any time you want more information about our episodes or Run Life Today, remind all of you to go to our website, runlifetoday.org, like us, watch us, follow us, and subscribe. And share those episodes as well. But let me get back to Matt, because it is your birthday. So I'm going to start this whole thing off with happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much, Mickey.
So, Matt, our relationship began a few years back, and you know how these episodes go. I really think it's important we start off with, a little bit of background as to, where you come from, a little bit about your family, what you're willing to share there, and really your upbringing until probably, before you decided to go to school and in college or whatever that was. So fill us in on your background, Matt.
So I grew up in rural East Tennessee, in the mountains on an organic farm there. I have two kind of, somewhat hippie parents who have had a hobby farm there in their entire life. And so I grew up in sort of the rolling foothills of the Appalachians, in a real small town, basically around horses and dogs and chickens and, a lot of woods and free time, which I think was integral to who I am. And I went to school in Madisonville, Tennessee, and then was involved in a lot of things. I started, and I imagine you want a little fitness background as well. Started running early. Started running when I was probably in 8th or 9th grade. I was kind of a chubby kid and thought I need to do something, and started running and just kind of fell in love with it and started a cross country team at our little small rural high school. And that was how I got into running. And, and then started thinking about medicine even as early as like my junior or senior year and went from there.
So your family, siblings, brothers, sisters, or
yeah,
you?
I have one sister okay. Who's still in Tennessee. So
okay.
Actually right next door to mom and dad on the farm.
Okay. Are you older or younger?
No, I'm the oldest of the two of us. So I was the oldest of two.
Even older today. Sorry.
Even older.
I told you. Okay. So,
I've been 35 for years.
So Matt, high school Matt, growing up Matt, super studious, super sporty.
Super. So I have always, I guess too, when I think about, even as a young guy, I've always wanted to enjoy as much out of life as I possibly could. I was a long-haired kind of bon vivant in high school. So I just was, liked to have a good time, but smart and good at school and good at taking tests and curious. So did well in school, but not because I was really particularly studious, just because I was, pretty smart in a small town and able to push through. And sometimes you just show up and you're able to get things done.
Your high school mascot?
Well, so that's funny because I was during my junior year of high school, our high school integrated with another town. So this is a rural school district. So there was in the county 3 high schools, all in each of the little towns. And then in my senior year, my Madisonville High School, which had been the Tornadoes, integrated with the Von Orr High School and became Sequoia. So it was a bigger school that was the Chiefs. So I was the first graduating class of that high school.
Tornadoes and then the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Okay. I love that question. I was a Barracuda. I love mascots. And anytime we go to minor league baseball games or anywhere else, I always try to get a picture with the mascot,
Yeah.
Whether it's a Tortuga, which would be the Daytona Tortugas, or the jumbo shrimp in Jackson.
That's what I was just thinking. I was wondering if you were going to say the jumbo shrimp.
Yeah, the jumbo shrimp. Okay, so you hinted at something about schooling, right? So you went to East Tennessee State, I think,
yeah.
right?
And I did that for medical school. I went to King College for undergraduate. So I was at a small liberal arts school up on the Tennessee-Virginia border for my 4-year undergrad degree, and then East Tennessee State for my medical degree, both in the Tri-Cities region, which is the northeast corner of Tennessee.
Okay. And that you're thinking about medicine, right? So finish that. Elaborate a little bit on when
Yeah.
you
So
knew.
this is how I contextualize this, is that, like I said, I was a smart kid who liked to just, I was interested, I had a lot of interests. So I would get involved in drama, but I would also just as likely, go out for a good time and hang out with people and procrastinate as well. I ended up at King College because I liked their liberal arts model, and also they had a good acceptance rate to med school. But I think I really got serious about thinking about medicine at the end of my freshman year of college. There were two sort of defining events that sort of pushed me to really solidify that. And so the first was, I think I always thought deeply about, like, what is the meaning of life, even from when I was a younger kid. And I had I had this sort of spiritual awakening at the end of my freshman year of college that basically led me to ask the question, what is a way that I can use my life to make the world a better place? And at the same time, my mother was diagnosed at a young age with breast cancer. And that was the first real wake up call that, the living of life can be serious business, and the way you treat other people and the way you're in relationship with other people is one of the most serious things you do. And those two events, watching her and walking with her through her breast cancer, and also having a spiritual awakening, was a direct correlation that led me to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and led me through applying to medical school and really every other decision I've made thereafter.
Wow, thank you. That's powerful stuff. And she's in remission. So
yeah. So knowing what I know now, I'm really surprised. She almost died. She had a very large tumor that had early metastasis, and that was 7 years ago. And she's in remission and doing great, playing tennis in her. I won't tell her age because she'll be mad at me if she watches this.
we don't
still
need
playing tennis as in tournaments this weekend.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I mean, you may we talked about it maybe in your office that my mother is a cancer survivor from 1998. So I just remember back then, it was different than it is now. The treatments you can get, and she went through, I think, some of the first early rounds of the combo of radiation and chemotherapy, and it worked. Yeah, it did some damage, I believe, medically speaking, but she's with us, she goes to the beach every day down in New Smyrna, and I'm going to see her in a couple days. So,
that's cool.
Yeah, medicine has certainly advanced in that. So you wrapped up schooling around what year? Were you official?
So I finished college in 2000. So graduated with my undergraduate degree in 2000, and I went straight through. I was not really my plan. I had planned to take a year off between college and med school. I actually had applied and was working on going to China to teach English for a year, just because I thought it sounded fun. That was my backup plan if I didn't get into med school. And then I got excited about it and thought, oh, maybe I'll just do this instead. But got accepted to med school, and then got a grant that basically paid for med school. So it was something I couldn't turn down, and was like, I gotta go on to med school. And then went to East Tennessee State and graduated from East Tennessee State with my MD in 2004. And I focused while I was there. And one of the reasons I went to ETSU was that at the time, and they still do, have a really good rural track for training rural physicians. And I had always thought, even like I said, when I started thinking about medicine, I thought about medicine in earlier years, but when I really got serious about it, decided, like, I want to go be in a place where an out of the way place where other doctors maybe don't want to go. And getting a grant that paid for medical school kind of solidified in me, like, oh, good, I can go do what I want to do and not have to be worried about paying student loans off. And was able to, I had to take out little loans, but ended up doing this rural training track that, and then on to a residency in family medicine that also focused on training physicians to go to rural and somewhat frontier areas of the country and world. So I was out in Greeley, Colorado for my residency training. Okay.
Yeah. And gosh, what was it? FSU College of Medicine? I used to work across the street, and I just remember they had a focus at some point, of getting more you know, doctors, family, you know, residency into those rural areas as well, right? Same kind of.
They do. In fact, I've been involved with FSU in small degrees since I've been here in Tallahassee, and they have that same focus on training, particularly primary care physicians who are willing and desire to spend their life and their career working among either populations of need, whether they're, you know, needs in rural areas or you know, other underserved environments.
Yeah. So obviously you are like one of my favorite doctors. Okay. But I don't know if I've ever told you, you know, my favorite doctor is Patch Adams.
Yeah. Yes. Patch Adams. which is really honestly like that kind of, I mean, that came out when I was in, I think I was maybe in med school by that point in time when that movie came out, but it is like that motto. In fact, you know, pretty much before I was where I am in Southwood, pretty much every place I've ever been was a Patch Adamsy kind of place. I worked at a free clinic for a year in inner city Chicago. And, you know, before I was where I am now, I was working in Wakulla County, which is a rural county south of town, for 6 years. I was in rural North Carolina for a while. Yeah, I get it. I get the desire to, I mean, there's something really fulfilling about both doing good and also feeling like you're making people's, you know, impacting lives.
Well, you know, a couple of things I remember from his story, you know, again, it's treating the patient, not the disease, right? And you talked about the relationship piece early on. And that is, again, I think that's what you do, is you have relationships with people in your community. Yeah, you're treating them to some degree, but it's really, you're focusing on the patient, not their issues. But then my other favorite part is seeing things that other people don't see, you know, from that movie. It's just, you know, seeing these four fingers is easy, but seeing in between, you know, and reading in between the lines sometimes, and people's emotions and the way they do things is important. So I am a fan of Patch Adams for a lot of reasons, just because he was a nonconformist. Sometimes I could be a nonconformist, but yeah. So, but we'll move on. So, all right. So that's great stuff on the background. And I want to pause there just so I can start segmenting a little bit of the conversation, right? So when we talk about the lanes of work and life, so there's your upbringing, a little bit of background as to why you're doing what you're doing. But let's start with your career, all right? So professionally speaking, you know, walk us through chronologically some of those major steps for you, all the way up to where you're at today in your career, if you don't mind.
So I graduated in 2007 with my residency in family medicine. And I had also done, and I was still thinking, I want to do international stuff. And so I had decided that I was going to do a fellowship. So I did a tandem, you know, it wasn't really a fellowship. It was a course in international medicine where I spent some time in China and I'd spent some time in South America. And did a little coursework in tropical medicine and disease, and ultimately at the end of it all, didn't go overseas. Ended up in rural North Carolina, in Sylva, North Carolina, about an hour outside of Asheville, up in the mountains, and then spent 3 years doing the full spectrum family medicine thing, where I was delivering babies, going to the hospital, and just doing a lot of really cool stuff there. Helped with a migrant farm worker health network while I was in town, and was really fulfilling and really busy, and an enjoyable sort of first step in my career.
Good. Your Patch Adams start. Sorry.
Well, kind of.
I know. Yeah.
And you know, for a variety of reasons, my wife is a Florida girl, and we were making decisions early on, right? You know, like I told her when we got married, I said, marrying me means we're never living in Florida. We'll always have to be in the mountains.
Yeah,
I love it. And so, you know, that also goes to show that you don't always know what you want when you're in your early 20s. But so, yeah, and then we ended up from North Carolina, as you do. I was a little bit burned out because I was working really hard. So I decided, well, let's go do something cool for a year. We had 3 kids at the time, and I took a job in inner city Chicago working for a inner city Christian health center. That's a hybrid federally qualified health center. You know, basically a church-run faith-based nonprofit, and spent a year helping them open a new clinic. They have 5, at the time that I was there, they were opening their 5th clinic, sort of in the near west south side of Chicago, and spent a year doing that. And it was a very fulfilling, very hard but cool year. And that's sort of the route that led me to Florida, which was where we said, okay, I acquiesced to my wife, and and said, let's go close to your family and raise some kids.
So was that the primary reason then Chicago to Florida was around the family, or what was the business?
So
What was the opportunity?
so the the real answer to that was that I have, as I've thought about this, and as I've thought about the way that I tell the narrative in my interior place, is that I had this desire, like when I was in college, I became a Christian, and I wanted to, and I felt like I'm called to like go give my life in some way, and I always have tried to do that, and I get burned out and frustrated doing it, to be totally honest. And so we were in Chicago, grinding it away in this inner city clinic, and I thought, you know what, I'm ready to just step away and go work a job, and I'm ready to. In fact, I was at a pretty down place in my life. I was ready to kind of walk away from religion and spirituality and everything. And we moved here in part because I realized, like, I need a sunnier, warmer environment, closer to kids, where I can go to work. And I laugh and say that, I was willing to go to Africa for Jesus, but I wasn't really willing to come to the panhandle of Florida. And I came here and just, in the weird way, fell in love with this place. Loved what I started working in McCullough, and just was filling a need, and really healed a lot in that first year here of just being able to. And I think being in the sun actually helps me a lot. I think there's a lot to that seasonal effect of, and having long, dreary winters. By March, I'm a pretty miserable person to live with. The first year we were here, my wife said to me, she said, I came home one day from work, and she said, "What is wrong with you?" I said, "What do you mean, what is wrong with you?" And she said, "You've just been happy for so long. I don't know what to do with you." I like what I'm doing. I like it here. It's good.
So you're experiencing Wakulla, and then you transitioned one or two more times just here, right?
Yeah. So I transitioned. So I was down there for 6 years, and I there's a couple of backstory pieces that I didn't probably say that now might be worth saying. The first is that we have 4 children. So I'm married to my college sweetheart, and we have 4 wonderful children between the ages of 15 and 7. And my kids this was 4 years ago. My kids were starting to get into sports and activities and dance, and I was commuting to and from work. And I realized that one of the things that I needed and wanted was to be closer, to be able to show up to those events in my kid's life. And so I had a conversation with my employer, Tallahassee Memorial, and was able to, come to a mutual agreement that helping them reboot their Southwood clinic would be a fun and task for me. And I've been there for the past 4 years.
Awesome. And of course, I really wanted to get to that transition, because that's where,
that's where we met each other.
Yeah, that's where we met. And yeah, I mean, I remember that transition, because that's around the time I guess I was working at the hospital. So I was aware of the new, physician coming to Southwood, which was woohoo. I was happy about that. So I do want to get to the lane eventually of family and faith too, because I know that's super important to you. And like you just said, you dedicate time to that, to be present. But when you look at your career thus far, you still have some years to go. I take it you want to continue being a physician, but what makes you different from other doctors, if that's an okay question to ask, number one. But what's been your key so far to success?
I think I define one of the measures of this, and when we kind of danced around this before we started recording, was that one of the things I most enjoy about my job is just like being able to hear people's stories and walk with them. I'm a primary care physician, so there are other physician specialties where they fix things, right? They come in, they take out your gallbladder, or they treat your cancer, or they open up arteries in your heart. That's not my specialty. My specialty is the long game. I'm the one who's in this for the long relationship. So I'm with you when you're healthy, and sometimes I'm with you when you're not, and then I'm with you when you're. So I'm, and being able to walk through that process with people, and have I feel like I've got a really unique practice where I take care of a very diverse mix of people from different walks of background, walks of life, from from all over Tallahassee, and still a lot of people from Wakulla County, and just get to hear their stories. And the truth is, we all kind of struggle with the same things. We all struggle with, whether it's sickness, but it's in a deeper way, just relationships and wanting to be loved and trying to find meaning in our lives. And I get to be, it's a really, really sacred place that I get to walk through that with people. And just and then, I think I may have said this once already. Sometimes you just show up. You just show up and be willing to have that conversation, and that matters.
Yeah, there's few places where people can go to have non-judgmental conversations, and we laugh about, the barber shop or barkeep, right? I mean, next thing you know, you're just telling them everything while they're cutting your hair or they're pouring you a drink. And obviously the education there is a little different than what you're doing, right? But it's somewhat similar, right? Because they get to tell you, and you're not going to judge them, but you're going to do what you can for them, So I appreciate you doing that for me, and sending me along the way. But I would like to see you in Southwood with the little black bag, walking around doing some house.
I do have a black bag, and I do make house calls.
Okay.
So I generally reserve those so I often do, and I fell into this. So I started casually making house calls back when I was in North Carolina. My migrant farm worker health program, we were basically a mobile unit that would go to, to these farms where guys and their families often were being housed. And I realized then that walking into someone's living situation tells me more about their health than a 30-minute interview. And because part of my specialty is we really strongly focus on the social determinants of health. So it's very hard to treat your diabetes if you're homeless, right? That's a social determinant.
Yeah.
And
right.
So I started in Wakulla. That was one of the, it's a long story that we don't have time for, but except to say that, so I started making house calls, and I usually do it on often elderly patients who have a real hard time getting to see me. And people who are on hospice. That's almost always, if you're at the end of your life, it's very onerous to come to the physician. So I pack up my little black bag that was given as a gift by a family friend when I graduated med school, and haul it off to people's houses and show up, and they say, I didn't know doctors made house calls anymore. I love doing what I do. This is fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. So I'm glad I walked right into that one. Good. So let's move to another lane.
Sure.
Again, continued luck, and thanks for what you do professionally in help healing the sick and treating patients here in Southwood, Wakulla, and everywhere. So thank you for that. So let's talk about outdoors and fitness lane, because again, I just knowing a little bit about you and researching, stalking Facebook and other things, I know you appreciate the outdoors, whether it be kayaking and hiking or fishing, but also running and other things. So share with our audience a little bit about your commitments to the fitness outdoor lane, if you will.
Yeah. So, I predominantly, when it comes to fitness, I'm a runner. I'm not particularly a fast runner, but I like to run, and I'm and I'm pretty good with endurance stuff. And I run so that I really have thought about this. I don't run to win races, although there have been times that has happened. I run predominantly so that I can continue to live the life that I want to live. I think fitness is, and from a physician standpoint, from a medical standpoint, there's very few things that pay the dividends that regular cardiovascular and physical fitness exercise does. So, it's something that's free. You don't have to pay for a drug to do it. And it keeps your heart and your mind and your bones and your body and all these many things healthy, to do the things that you want to do. So I love the outdoors, have been a runner, like I said, since I was in high school. Basically played soccer in high school, and even walked on and played for a very, very short period my freshman year of college, but at a very small school. Have been an outdoorsman, hiking, grew up doing a lot of trout fishing in the mountains of Tennessee. And my dad and I every year would do a 7 to 10 day trip where we would backpack somewhere. Usually it started off on the Appalachian Trail, and we did most of the section through Tennessee, North Carolina, and Southwest Virginia. And then in other years, we've done Glacier National Park and places in Colorado and just love and feel the most at peace in, the middle of the wilderness. So when people talk about vacations, if my wife says, let's go to Disney World, I think, oh, can we go to Colorado instead and be out in the middle of
nowhere? Yeah, I'm with you on that. We're going to Asheville, actually, first time over after July 4th week. So I may call you and say, hey, where should we go?
Yeah, it's a lovely place. There's lots of good hiking there.
So you in the family too commitment to the outdoors. If I'm correct, if I remember, I mean, engaging your kids in that whole process too, right?
I have. I mean, so one of the things that I think is very important is living your life intentionally. I think I've kind of hinted at that as we've talked. And I think that when we started having kids, it's a challenging time to be raising kids. There's a lot of distractions and I think a lot of things that do derail a lot of kids, and helping them find things. And this does make my kids crazy sometimes, but I think it's very important we try to have a relatively low tech household. So as far as tablets and computers and video games, there's really not that many around here. We're committed to getting kids out. And so whether it's sailing, which I love, my kids don't always love, or whether it's kayaking, which they do like, or mountain biking, which they like, and hiking, which they do. So we really try to make it a family thing, but both as fitness, but also I feel like that the outdoors not only allow you to be physically fit, but also really, really engender a lot of mental well-being as well.
But I want to bottle up what you said in the very beginning about running, because people always ask, oh, it's not good for you, and it hurts this and it hurts that. And you being a physician, how you clearly stated how beneficial, there's nothing better for you from a cardiovascular standpoint and what it can do on the inside of your body more than the external, right? Yeah, I got muscles on my legs, great. But it's about that blood circulating through my system and the heart and the lungs, right?
Yeah. And running is my preferred form. My wife was a professionally trained ballet dancer, and so she likes to, and she still dances and gets her cardiovascular workouts through different ways than I do. But I think like the key is doing it, right? Finding something that you can do. And I think running, people say running hurts you. Yeah, well, anything done in the wrong way is bad for you. But running, if you do it correctly, is great for your body. Do you have time for me to tell you a cool race story?
Of course. Yeah.
I don't know if you know this story. So this is the last marathon. I thought, we're talking about fitness and things. And so I'm going to add two caveats. Running is good for you. I've already said that, but also not doing it smart. So listening to your body, and then we can talk more about that after I tell you the story. So the last marathon I ran was in 2017. So my sister and I ran that one together. We decided to do the Fort Collins marathon, which was in May. And so we ran from, it's a really, really cool race. You start up in the Poudre Canyon, which is about 7,000, 8,000 feet. And then you just run down the canyon into the center of Fort Collins, where they have a big party. And, Front Range of Colorado has a lot of beautiful scenery and delicious beer and good food and lots of other fun things. So the party was fun. So when I'm running, I don't normally stop. So we took off that morning, and let me add the backstory. And this is a little bit heavy, but this was a race that I'd signed up to do and trained to do, and then almost didn't go complete. So just a few weeks before the race, my wife's mother was violently killed in a home invasion. And so we had just gone through this family tragedy where we were all still reeling. And I remember it was the final day when I was supposed to do my longest run to prep me for the marathon. I think I had a 22 or a 24 mile run set up for the day. And my running partners and I had been talking, and I told my wife, I said, I can't leave you here. I've got to go. I can't leave for a long weekend to go to Colorado to do this race. You're still trying to pick up the pieces from this tragedy. And so I made that decision. And then all of my running friends sort of held my feet to the flames and said, well, at least finish your training. I mean, you don't have to go necessarily, but why don't you finish your training? And then they surrounded me and said, finish the race. You've trained for this. We're going to help take care of your wife and kids while you're gone. And so my sister and I met up in Colorado, and the morning of the race, are running down the canyon, and came around mile 15 and there was a guy down on the ground. And so I said to my sister, there was two helpers helping out. And I said, should we stop? I mean, I'm a doctor. I probably should. And I go over and say, hey, is everything okay? Or, I'm a physician. And one of the, it was just another runner said, yeah, he was just in front of us. He fell and hit his head and he's unconscious. And so I flipped the guy over. He was laying face down and he did have blood on his head and he was unconscious. And I checked his eyes and I felt his pulse and he didn't have a pulse. And I said, oh crap, we got to start CPR. And so my sister and I started CPR and got an AED, and he was in a fatal heart rhythm, ventricular tachycardia. We shocked him. And about the time we shocked him, his brother came up, who was running the race with him, but he had been ahead of him, and his brother, when I were there helping, his brother was helping his airway. And we, between the early first responders and ourselves, did CPR for about 20 minutes. Then the ACLS team came and a helicopter came, and they, I gave his brother, who I'd never met before, a big hug, and we traded phone numbers. I said, we got to stay in touch. And they loaded him up on the helicopter, and my sister and I said, well, let's finish the race. So we finished the race, albeit about mile 22 was really, really hard because I'd had that huge adrenaline dump. And, so the 2 points, I guess, that I would say is sometimes, I really felt like it was a place where I was not only at the right place at the right time, but kind of where I was supposed to be in that race. Mm-hmm. But also he told me later that he'd been having chest pain for a few weeks before he ran the race. And so, like I said at the beginning of this, listen to your body. If running's hurting you, come talk to me or your physician, and make sure it's not anything major.
No, I mean, that was in the news, by the way, right? Oh, yeah. I remember that made, news stories about, Florida doctor helped save man's life, in the middle of a marathon and stuff. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that story, more detail for everybody here, because that was amazing. And you finished the run.
And I finished the run.
And you finished. What was your time?
Doesn't matter. I saved somebody's life.
Okay. All right. Fine, man. I can't deny that I'm a runner. I just wanted to know, just to say, way to go. All right. So let's transition to another leg. Thank you for that story. Let's talk a little bit about the community, right? Because I know, again, you've been in Wakulla, Tallahassee, working and being out in the community, doing other things. So from a personal and or family standpoint, where do you spend your volunteer time? What charitable causes do you and the family like to engage in? Just share some commitments there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so we are integral members of our church. We go to Incarnation Anglican and are very engaged with things that they're doing there. And I think we're trying to raise our children with a service mentality. So we have been, even through the pandemic, for instance, my wife was taking the kids for going to Good News Outreach and helping them pack food bags for people who needed food that were not able to leave their house to go to the grocery store or whatever. So we do things like that. We were just having the conversation last night about trying to put together, we've had this conversation with a lot of our friends about trying to do this on a more intentional level. And we're spitballing some ideas of, basically trying to get a group of families together who say, okay, we're gonna do life together, but once a month we're gonna go volunteer at these organizations. And so we've been involved in a lot of, and we spend time with a couple other nonprofits locally and church related stuff. And my wife's involved with these things too. So it's very much part of how we spend our life.
Good News Outreach. I'm a big fan of what they do. Not only because, they are a client of my business, but I just appreciate, again, what they do. And they do it across multiple lanes, food pantry. They do some elder services as well. And of course, they have housing, for families, single parents with kids, and then also a reentry home, for folks coming back into society, if you will. So I'm a big fan of good news outreach. And so the church, when you're involved in the church, missions, serving on on the board and those types of things.
Yeah, my wife is involved with actually with an organization nationally that does a lot of missions work with the Anglican
Okay.
Church. So it's New Wineskins Missionary Network. She's on their board. I
Okay.
am on the board of the Pregnancy Help and Information Center, the FI Center on the South Side, which is sort of a nonprofit that helps women who find themselves either in having young kids in crisis or being pregnant in crisis or in any sort of family related crisis. We do a lot of work. We're right next door to the Bond Center, so that's another place that we're engaged.
Okay.
Yeah, and Incarnation as a church is very focused on these sort of missional models and trying to be a church that is not just for the people in the church, but trying to meet larger community need.
Okay. And for you, so you've mentioned trying to get the kids, right? Raise your kids to be with a servant heart, if you will.
Yeah.
Where did you learn that from? I mean, I know you talked about in college your
Yeah.
spirituality and your faith came, but giving back to the community and stuff.
Well,
Where did
so
that come
my
from?
my parents, my mom particularly, she was a public school teacher, even from an early age. I remember when she was when I opened my first checking account. I think I was in 8th grade, and she said, "Look, you're gonna be starting to make money. We're gonna give you an allowance." And my mom had she was a very, this is how it is kind of person. So we had a lot of responsibility as a kid, for whether it was helping clean out stalls. And she's going to watch this and say, "You didn't shovel as much as you think you did." But I remember a lot of days cleaning out the barn, or whether it was helping. She taught me to cook when I was young, so I had to cook a meal regularly for the family. But she also said, part of what you do is you give. And so I expect you to give 10% of whatever you make to some other cause. It doesn't have, and my parents were not religious, but not particularly religious growing up. And so I remember I was really very passionate about the environment. So I would donate 10% of everything I made to Greenpeace when I was in 8th grade, and do and that kind of thing. So just early on, got the idea that giving is really important. And as I've aged, one of the things, when I was in college, there's a very, very strong, that is sort of at the heart of the Christian gospel is, Jesus gave himself away for other people, and so that they could have peace with God. And the same thing is it calls us to give of our lives. And I have very much resonated really from my early 20s, got turned on to St. Francis as a role model. And I don't know how much you know about St. Francis, but the Franciscan spirituality is one that is embodied in this idea that of both like care for and love of the beauty of the natural world, but also in giving one's life away is really where you find joy and happiness.
Okay.
And I would say that 100%, like as I think about the ways in which so often the things we think will make us happy only make us miserable, right? Whether it's, and humans are very bad at running that software of projecting where happiness will come from. But I think, and this isn't just in the Christian spiritual tradition. This is kind of a universal truth, I think, is that in the denying of oneself and giving away, and I think that there's a way that you can, you have to again do that the right way as well. But it can be a source of great joy for people. And I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, no, it does. You said where you've learned it and where it started and where it ignited or what the catalyst. You filled all that in, and I agree 1,000%. Whether we admit it openly or not, when we give to other people or that sense of satisfaction or whatever, it just feels good, to be able to give something to others, and the difference it makes, and to be able to witness it, right? To witness that difference. And it's all because we sacrificed something or gave something to somebody else. And then the other side of it is, it seems like the more we give, then more often we get, right? And I don't want to say that the wrong way, like that's the expectation. No, it's not. I'm not giving and supporting others so I can get something back. But more often than not, you end up getting something back, and it's that good feeling, or maybe then something karma good happens to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I do think that there is, like, it does. Yeah. it changes your heart in a way that allows that openness to that reception. And again, it's not a magic formula. I'm going to give and get something in return. But it is. I think there is often an unexpected, unquantifiable reward.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of intentional, because you mentioned that word a few times now, right? So are there any other lanes? Are there any other commitments, work-life lanes where you're very intentional in spending some of your time and energy and resources, either as an individual or family? Any other areas you want to share before I get to your suggestions and tips?
I mean, we've covered all. I mean, I think by the time, and this is what I find in my middle years, is that by the time I'm intentional about my career and my kids and my wife and my own fitness and my own mental health,
In church, in community, yeah.
right, and I have, and I have a lot of things that I enjoy. I like to read. I like to cook. I like to sail. I like to do all these things. It's like, I've intentionaled it all out. every waking minute has been
right. No, I think the phrase would be, I have no more intentions, please.
Right.
Right.
You gotta keep your intentions also in check.
Yeah, that's right. No, I agree. So, all right. Again, thank you for all that you've shared. And again, we could probably expand upon a lot of those conversations, but let me get to, the most important question of the day. As we tell our audience every time, at the end of hearing these stories, we want to be able to give them something to walk away with, right? Some suggestions or tips. When it comes to the art of running more of life versus life running you. And basically we're talking about work-life integration. I don't believe there's ever really a balance. It's more about how can we get them all to happen, right?
Yeah.
And success, again, I tell people this is not a formula. It's an art that people learn over time. There's success, there's failure, there's, but it may work for you. It may not work for you, but at least I've got somebody here, Dr. Matt, who's done pretty good with it, and he's going to share some ideas and thoughts for you to be more successful too. So, Matt, fire away. What are your suggestions?
So I have a couple of. I've thought about this. I think that's a really hard question, honestly. But the things that I think there's some real practical answers, and then there's some more sort of philosophical answers to that. And so the practical things, I think, like I said, one of the ways to keep life from running you and you running life is to do it intentionally. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the tyranny of the urgent and to not actually focus on big picture things. So, we're all on this journey that's taken us somewhere. And wherever you're going, if you look at your life, you can see the steps along the way. So like, what we do really matters. And so I think like little things, like I structure, and I think that there are pieces that are really integral to that. So one is, I think, community. We've talked about that already. I have a group of friends with whom I am we do life together, right? We are part of both intentional things like having a Bible study sometimes, but also just getting together and having fun and raising kids together. I think having community is important because that helps you stay. It serves as a bumper, and I think also really just like setting aside and saying, this is the time that I'm going to do this. So actually, I try to say like, all right, what are the ways this week that I'm going to intentionally, not just with work, right? Like, what are the ways that what are my goals? And I try to do this quarterly, right? There's all these business books that talk about these things. I don't have to rehash that, but I also do it with my family too. And I say like, okay, I'm going to intentionally take off on Friday afternoons and pick my high school daughter up from Leon, and we're going to go get lunch together. Because that matters. It's not a big thing, but that relationship may be something that's a lifeline for her and a really hard transitional point in her life. And just because I love her too, it's fun to go get lunch with your kids.
Yeah.
So I would say that would be one thing. And the other thing too, that I think is really important, it kind of ties back into the question that you asked me at the beginning. How do you define success, or how do you think about your life in that way? I think living with an open heart. I don't know if that sounds maybe too mystic, but this idea that I think it's very easy to, as we go through life, get beat up and close off parts of ourselves from other people, like that giving away. Like, many of us by the time we're in our mid 40s have been through some things, right? We've been hurt by people. We've been let down by friends and family and business partners and jobs. And those things can form a real thick, I think, barrier around our heart. I think being able to say, no, I'm going to live this day. And I try to do this with my patients. I try to say, I want to be fully present in this moment. Like, I'm here. There's all kinds of things going on in all of our lives, but I think that's a really important way of measuring success, is to say, being present in the moment and having a heart of compassion that says, I'm going to be fully present in this moment. Is that too philosophical, or you tracking with me?
Yeah, no, I'm picking up what you're laying down. I am, because I'm a big believer in it. And when you ask me why am I doing this Run Life Today thing, there are mystic reasons too, right? And because I've been through some of those things, just like everybody has. And if it weren't for running, and if it weren't for things like this, endeavor, it helps me cope through those things. It makes my heart feel good, to do these things and to be in those spaces. So no, I get it. I love the mystic, but then I also like the practical, which you talked about earlier, right? So being intentional and scheduling things. The power of association, I think, is great. The community piece, where you surround yourself with like-minded people and you do things together, you hold each other accountable. I mean, you do life together. I think that's a great message too. But practically and then philosophically, I think it takes both to be able to integrate work and life and handle the emotions of life up and down every day. Yeah. That's good stuff, Doctor. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for
So, all right. As usual, this episode will be available on the website. So runlifetoday.org if you want to see this one when it's ready to go, and all of our others. Tune in the next time, but watch us, like us, follow us. Matt, I appreciate you spending some time with us on your birthday again, and sharing all that you did. And to you and everybody else, let's do the best we can to continue running life versus life running us. I'll see you soon, at least once a year.
Hope you don't need me anymore.
I know.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, buddy.